Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Mailbag, where we answer your questions to help you build a team this 2023 pre-season. My name is Damo, and joining me, as he usually does, is Clarky. How are you, mate?
Doing very well. Doing the peace signs in an audio format.
Yeah, people can't see that, Clarky.
You'd think I'd know after, what's this, season 3 of Mailbag?
Yeah, this is the third season. You should be pretty on the ball with that sort of stuff.
Let's get to the guests.
Our special guest this week is part of the KFC SuperCoach team. It's Al Paton. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, gents. Absolute pleasure to be here. I can't believe I'm just looking at the screen, counting down now. There's 27 days and 5 minutes until the first lockout of the KFC SuperCoach season. So that is creeping up on us. And, I think there's a lot of anticipation around this year. People really looking forward to the footy season, having the AFL back and KFC SuperCoach as well. So, there's I can tell you from what we're doing, there's, heaps of engagement, people getting on the side earlier than ever and starting to pick their teams, which is great to see. But, plenty to talk about.
And the preseason games just around the corner, starting next week, actually. Is there a player currently in your team, Al, that needs to cement themselves with a good preseason performance?
Plenty of those. I think the preseason also just is going to be so interesting this year when we have this first round of games that are all, I'm not even 100% sure. Are they being televised anywhere, or do you need to be like a member to get the link and, they're just streaming through a camera on the back of a truck or something? And we're going to be trying to spot who's playing and, running off halfback and which rookies are getting the game. So there'll be so much interest in that. I know the Herald Sun is planning to send reporters out to all these games. So we'll be drilling them before they go and making sure they're watching the right guys. So keep an eye on that. And then the next week we get one weekend of like official practice matches, which will be on Fox Footy. So we'll be all over those. And any players who bob up in one or two of those games could definitely earn a spot in lots of Supercoach teams. And there's plenty of mine. Probably one guy that I've just put in my team in the last couple of days that I definitely want to see in the flesh before I go there and lock him in for round one is Charlie Constable at Gold Coast. We know he's been on the fringe for a few years, put up some massive numbers in Geelong's VFL team a couple of years ago, and looked like he was sort of a Supercoach rookie just waiting to burst onto the scene, and it just hasn't quite happened for him, even at the Suns last year. But now the reports are he's found a role for him in the back line, which we know can be really good for Supercoach. So I've got him on my defensive bench at the moment, 123K, but definitely, wouldn't be doing that just on faith. You want to actually see some of these guys in action. It's one thing to see it on Twitter, but another thing to actually watch him in the flesh.
You know what? The Melbourne practice game is on the 4th of March, I believe, against Richmond, and it's at Casey Field. So we live not too far away from Casey Field, which is great as a Melbourne fan. But it's actually the one weekend where my brother is getting married and he's having his bucks that weekend. And I've already chastised him about it, but my lovely, lovely wife is now going to the practice match to tell me just how much of a split Braun and Grundy are going to have in that match. So she's doing the legwork for me this year.
She can tell you all of the good Supercoach goss as well. Let's get to the questions because there's quite a lot of them. We'll start with this one from Fraser Kenny. He wants to know Sheed / Warple and Cornelio or Sam Flanders and Jack McRae.
I always find these. I was thinking before I came on. I hope there's not too many of these questions where someone says, these 6 players or these 6 players. It always gets very complicated. But I did see a note from I think John Ralph was out at the Dogs today. They had some intra-club action, and he just had a note in there about how their midfield mix is going to look this year. Caleb Daniel's gone in, is the one big change, and there was a note that Jack McRae might be pushing forward a bit more. So that sort of had some alarm bells all over it from what I could see. And Flanders is another one that we're definitely going to be watching. I'll have to look up when these Gold Coast practice games are on because the numbers wise, it's all there from what he's done in the VFL and in his draft year and everything else. It's just cracking into that midfield because even if he gets named in round one, I don't think I'd be confident enough to pick him because he could easily just be playing on the half forward line and score 70 points. But if he can actually get into that centre square, he could be a fantastic pick at his price. But I think both those guys probably are a little bit risky for me at this stage. Who are the first options?
Sheed or Warple and Cornelio?
Oh, well, I probably like that one because I'm a big fan of Cornelio. Obviously, he was great for us last year. And in the second half of the season, when he was played as a centre bounce midfielder, he averaged about 112, I think. And I can't see that changing with Hopper and Taranto going out. Obviously, they've got a new coach, but I think that's a pretty safe bet for him to average, 105 plus probably in the forward line. And Sheed Warple, probably Sheed, I'm a little bit more confident on it. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, again, let's look at all these guys because we know Warple was good a few years ago, but then his numbers in the last couple of years have been pretty terrible, to be honest. But obviously, there's some opportunity there potentially in the Hawks midfield. And Sheed coming back from injury, I think he would just be a safe, maybe 90-point guy. But that could be enough at that price.
Yeah, so I think Warple is going to be 100%. As we said, practice matches are around the corner, and he's one that's going to be, I think, really high on people's radars. So I'm not even keen really to pit him right against Sheeters, go one or the other, because we just don't know. At this stage, it's all reports and training, and everybody's doing great in the preseason. But out of those two options, I love the draft doctors. So in solidarity with them, I am a Sam Flanders truther. But we know pretty much with a reasonable amount of certainty the top 3 forwards for this year, barring injury or any kind of significant setback, surely at this stage has to be Cornelio, Dunkley, and Taranto. So why would you deprive yourself of someone who is clearly going to be in the top forwards, which is a much harder line to find the premium in than the midfield? Like, Al pointed out that there's been reports at the moment of Jack McRae kind of doing the old Bevo salad and moving around a bit. McRae and Bont both in recent match team and intra-club kind of stuff. So, at this stage, why would you deprive yourself of someone who is probably, let's be cautious and say a top 5 forward? That just makes more sense because you can easily find a stepping stone in the mids. Conservatively would be easier than in the forwards.
Cornelio has the history of being a fairly reliable scorer when he's played in the midfield, which looks like that's where he will be under Adam Kingsley. Sheed's underpriced, so if he can return to where he has averaged in the past, he's going to make you about 100 to 150k. Warple and Flanders, you're banking on them to break out, and if you want a safer selection, you would go with Sheed and Cornelio rather than Flanders and McRae, because you know that Sheed and Cornelio can potentially reach heights that these other guys probably, well, we don't know if they're going to reach that high. And then Jack McRae, I feel like he's going to be a solid selection, but it depends on where Luke Beveridge wants to play him. I think he could be one of those up and down midfielders who might slide out of the top 8 to 10 midfielders, but be a solid selection for the run home if he comes down to a gettable price. So yeah, I think Sheed and Cornelio is probably the pick of that. We'll move to the next question. Probably should ask Dan Batten this one, considering it's about a rookie, but is Cam McKenzie a good on-field option for early in the season?
I could take that on notice for Dan, but I mean the reports, are really good out of the Hawks. So what is he, 180k? So you would want to put him on the field if you're picking him. You don't want 180k sitting on your bench. I guess it's just, who else have we got there? I think everyone's pretty much starting Will Ashcroft and also Will Phillips in those sort of, M7, M8 kind of spots. Do you want another 180k midfielder there? It's how many how much can we spend on some of those rookies? I think after those two, I probably want to be going down to some 123, 117 kind of guys. But we just talked about the Hawks. Their midfield is wide open for someone to go in there and do really well. Pardon me, do really well. I'm a little bit nervous after, we all picked Josh Ward last year and he had a fantastic preseason. And same sort of, pedigree, high draft pick and plenty of opportunity. But just with these kids in their first year, it is hard for them to score consistently, 70s, 80s, you might get a 90 or 100, and then the next week they drop a 50. So apparently Ashcroft might be an exception to the rule, but that's probably one of the things we like about Phillips. At least he's been in the system for a few years. So he's not in my team at the moment, but I guess if he tears up a preseason game, that could change.
Josh Ward from last season has me a little concerned. I don't want to pay 180k for a rookie who'll average 45. So I'm probably got to steer clear of Josh Ward the best I can. And as you said, if you're playing 180k, you probably want this player on the field, and I just don't have room for him. So he's one that I'm probably not going to start unless he has an amazing preseason game. Sam Mitchell seems to like to ease his new players into the system a bit slowly. So I don't know if I can pay 180k for someone who is going to be a bit hot and cold, could potentially have dates with the subvest as well.
Yeah, I think Hawthorn probably very realistically are setting their sights on achievable rather than, they know that they're not going to come out of the blocks and, be top 4 this year because they've got all this young talent. So I think Sam Mitchell will probably do the right thing and, really find the right roles and the right positions for his players throughout there. So 180k is a little bit steep, but really, if I'm paying that much, I want to know that the job security is there. And it's just really hard to tell at this time of the year. So I think there's all the opportunity in the world for these young kids, but I think I'd probably, like you guys said, I'd probably prefer someone who's been in the system a little bit longer, had some time at AFL level or even training at AFL level, and then they can move into, as we see like the second year breakouts and the third year breakout where they kind of find their footing. So I mean, it could be a on-field option for early in the season if he has the security. I mean, we're paying. We got to pay for the rookies. That's the number one thing. Economy is the game. It's not. It's not about you've got to get this rookie that's going to score you a 90. I think Ashcroft will be very close to a Sam Walsh like by all reports, but that's an anomaly and a 1 in a million.
That question was from Frank Foot via the website comments.
Thanks, Frank.
Clarky, you've got your eye on Tim English. The SuperCoach Roach wants to know if his soft tissue problems are too much of a concern, or does 36 trades make it less of a risk?
See, and it's one thing that I really like with the increase in trades as we go on and like the evolution of SuperCoach as a game is that it does allow you to take more risks. Previously, when we had more limited trades, I think I remember when I started, it was probably closer to the 30 mark. In terms of trades, there were no trade boosts and things like that. So a preseason soft tissue injury would have been really concerning, and it still is, especially on Tim English, who has been, one of the probably R1 for most people, I would say, this season. But, it's probably worth the risk. He's got time to deal with the soft tissue injury. It's not great, and Tim English himself has had a pretty unlucky run with injury in the past season as well. So I think it's definitely on the watch list. I am not concerned per se, but I am cautious. So if he's not going to be 100% for round 1, I'd probably be pivoting to, say, a Marshall or a Lice, not even Lysette. Lysette is apparently carrying some injury at the moment, so maybe a Teakle. But I'd probably be pivoting round 1 to somebody who, at least we know their body's fit. I think everybody at this stage of, because we don't know exactly how the ruck situation is going to pull out, I'd be pivoting to someone who you think is going to be a keeper, so a Jared Witts type, or somebody who is cheaper but gives you an option to look in. So a Darcy Cameron, if he's come out of your side, probably bringing him back in to give yourself a look. It's definitely, there's still time. As Al said, it feels really close when you're looking at the timer and it says 27 days now, but that's still considerable amount of weeks for him to get his body right and to return back to full training, and it doesn't discount all of the work he's done so far.
I mean, I think everyone's pretty comfortable with the fact that Set and Forget is gone now, with Gawn and Grundy now at the same team. But I just think you'd hate to be agonising over your ruck line every time Tim English gets subbed out, has a niggle, misses a few weeks. I think the extra trades help, but you don't want to be using 10 trades just to get a durable ruck. And we know that there's been previous seasons where ruckmen have been traded out, and you've just been spending trade after trade, week after week, on these ruckmans coming in and out, in and out. Yeah, so I think if you're paying 580k for a ruckman, you want them to be there for the entire season, or as close to the entire season as possible. I don't think the extra trades should give you that extra security to start someone just because.
Yeah, I'm nervous. I'm nervous, but I don't know what I'm doing in that. I think I'm happy with Rowan Marshall at R1, but after that, I've got no idea. So, yeah, news today that Bryn Teakle might be going up, right up the top of the pecking order at Port Adelaide is intriguing. If we could somehow start a second ruck for 180 grand, I'd probably just about do that. I think.
I think a lot of people would do that, to be honest. I think I really think that at 198k or whatever he is, I think if Ken Hinkley comes out and says that he's going to be their number one ruckman and they're going to back him in for the season, I don't think too many people would have too many issues starting him and being able to beef up other places or other areas of the ground.
Well, let's be real about it. We did that last year with Matt Flynn. We did the same thing. A lot of people did the same thing where they took this ruck who is bargain price. Let's say bargain price, and he pushed himself all the way up to 400. He's 464,000 this year, so it's not unheard of for a lower price ruck. It comes down to the same thing: is that it's about opportunity and security. So if Lyset's setback is going to push him back, 4 to 6 weeks, or anything like that, that gives you enough time to get the Bryn Teakle economy. If he's getting those times and if he proves that he can play well at the AFL level. I don't see any problem with that. It'd be pretty ballsy again. Same thing with it's scary to do, but I can see some coaches doing that. And if it comes off, then you feel like an absolute winner. You feel like all the lights and bells are going off and the coins are pouring out.
And the bonus obviously is, as Damo said, like that just gives you 400, 500 grand to spend somewhere else. Imagine what you could do with that. So it would be very tempting, but you'd want to be confident he's the man there.
I know it's not specifically related to the question, but Damo, you did say Set and Forget is dead, which is something that I've been hearing this preseason. I wonder if I can get your guys' opinion on it. Do we think is Set and Forget dead purely because Gawn and Grundy are on different teams now, or do we think it maybe just pivots to another set of two rucks? Like, maybe it could be Tim English or Rowan Marshall or Darcy Cameron and another one of those, like a Jared Witts. Is Set and Forget really completely dead and buried?
It's all about finding that next set of players that you could just lock in without even really thinking. So it's dead for now, but it might be revived early in the season once we know which ruckmen are going to stand up.
Yeah, halfway through the year, it might be obvious that we all should have just picked Marshall and English, or Marshall and Grundy, or Blitzarves and Luke Jackson or something. It's so unknown. So
I was about to say Blitzarves as well, so you read my mind out. Blitzarves and Nick Nui, Set and Forget,
yeah,
exactly.
I don't mind Nick Nat, but anyway, we'll move on.
We'll move on to the next question. Josh P has actually asked a couple of questions, but we'll start with this one. Is Yo at your first defensive position, so D1, a real possibility? Josh, no.
Oh, sorry,
it's not. As much as people keep talking about all the value options in defense, I still think the rookies probably have the worst job security. And I've rarely seen a team team full of mid prices, if that's how you want to manage it, do well or pan out the way people want. So I think Yo at D1, I love when people take risks, but I don't think that this is a calculated risk.
I mean,
Well, mate,
like, look, I don't like poo-pooing people's ideas too hastily, right? Because it's all about how your team as a whole looks. And I'm just kind of scrolling through the list now to see if you've got Yo at D1, who are your options who's going to be D2? Because realistically, you are doing value, but you're kind of doing it irresponsibly.
well, I mean, I think you could go with just maybe one of these real top, 600K defenders, or certainly two, or maybe one in a day cost or something like that. But that would give you. I think even my defense at the moment has 5 rookies, 3 on the field, with Gimby as the most expensive guy there, and then down to a couple on the bench. But if you've got Yo at D1, you've got 7 rookies. Can you tell me 7 defensive rookies who we're confident are going to play every week? That's a massive call. And then, we know how injury prone Yo is. What happens if he goes down? You lose your D1. I'm not sure where you'd go from there.
Well, you've got such great options as Supercoach King Noah Bolter. Hunter Clark, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, why not?
Worse, maybe.
Tom McCartan. Jaden Hunt at 285. He is somebody who is an out there prospect, but could average 70. So there's
I think there probably is some value there, but I mean, he's just not going to score enough points to be.
Look, Josh, I'll compromise with you. Make Yo your D2. Make your D1 Sam Doherty, and you can have Yo at D2. I'll allow it. Not that it's my place to allow you to have your team. Make it however you want, and I support you because you're our special little super coaches. But just pick a top tier D1. Have a parachute plan. Always have a parachute plan because you don't want to pull the cord and find out it's an anchor.
I tell you what, Josh really likes his value options because his next question asks, is Ben Cunnington rightly or wrongly flying under the radar?
I love that. That's a much better question. Sorry, they're all great questions.
I think he is a little bit, but I think he is actually good value there, and he could average, easily 90s, and for his price, that'd be a great return. The problem is that forward line. Like, are you picking him ahead of, like we were talking about the guys before? Would you pick him ahead of Taranto or ahead of Canelio? There's just too many. I can't pick all those guys that I want to pick as it is. I haven't got Rosie, I'd love to have him. I'd like to have Butters. Obviously, those guys are a little bit more expensive, but yeah, I think just those forward spots are at such a premium that there's sort of no room for him there.
He'll shoot up once he has a good role in the preseason matches, and I think I think that a lot with because you could probably ask the same question about LDU. Because LDU's in that same bracket of what him, Tom Green, Tom Mitchell are all kind of around that weird price that people are like, there's opportunity, there's a kind of pattern that we can recognize. Why is this guy not being picked by people? And it's because Ben Cunnington's in this weird space, which is North Melbourne, and nobody knows what's going on there. Is Aaron Hall going to play like a really decent role in the back line? Where's Jack Zeeble playing? Because that's one that comes up pretty regularly. Like, they're kind of in this weird little bubble where nobody knows what's behind the shields. So once we kind of know that Ben Cunnington, if he's going to get, is it 40, 50%, 60% CBAs, is that going to be the split, or is it going to go to the younger guys? Then that'll really cement whether people are going to take that as a value option. And I mean, he's in 10% of teams, which isn't outrageously low.
Yeah, that seems about right.
1 in 10. I don't have him personally because my eggs were in the Errol Goulden basket. But even then, that's a completely different beast. So it's not right or wrong that he's flying under the radar. I think it's about where people want to take their risks.
Like I said, Josh is really looking for some value.
Great name, Josh. I love it. I support you.
Should there be more interest in Lockie Hunter?
Not that I can think in draft. I could see picking him in draft could be a good move.
He needs to average 95 to make 100K. His history suggests it's a coin flip as to whether that will happen.
He's cheaper than I thought, to be honest. I didn't realise he was in the 300s, but
he has a good year and then a bad year, a good year and then a bad year. He I think he's gone like 80, 88, 102 and then 86 and then 115 or something in 2020.
Yeah, he had one really big year, yeah.
I mean, 2020 shortened quarters, it was a different kind of scoring regime because it was the shortened quarters. I think at his price, he needs to average 95 to be worth it. And in a new system, I don't know if he will get there.
I think he could get there. I'm probably a little bit more closer to he will than you, Damo, based on what you're saying. But that's purely... I could see him going to a point where he's going to be playing opposite Ed Langdon, right? And they're going to be playing pretty similarly into role. Like Ed Langdon will run the ball from, the defensive square to the forward square to kick a goal. But Lockie Hunter, his game style is going to be a little bit different to that, but he's still going to be integral to the way Melbourne move the ball off the wing. I could see him probably averaging similar to Langdon would be, I think, the basement of how that goes, which is like a 5 to maybe 10 point upside to what he's currently priced at, which isn't enough to make him a stepping stone. So if you're interested in him, you're probably interested in him because you think he can go 90, which I think he'll have a week where he just goes absolutely nuts because the ball's on that side of the field. And then you'll have a week where it's not so good because the ball's on the other side of the other wing. I know Azza, the wonderful stats man, Azza is very interested in Lockie Hunter, and thinks that the data backs that he could conceivably get back to some of his best football. And let's say as well, he left the Bulldogs in not the happiest way. That was kind of a bittersweet ending. So this might revitalize him and give him some opportunity to do some other things. I don't see it. I think there are better options at just under 400. The 392 mark is an interesting price point to play with and fit into a structure.
Yeah, I think that's his biggest problem in KFC SuperCoach, because I could actually see him going all right on a wing there at the MCG. If Melbourne go through, and we know he can just rack up, it's a little bit of a seagull in the nicest possible way, and pick up plenty of the pill. And he could definitely have some good games, but it's just where does he fit into your team? Like he probably has to be a stepping stone at that price. I can't see him being a keeper. He's not going to be a top 8 midfielder. But then, again, you sort of put him in the same bracket as guys like Dom Sheed or Jacob Hopper, and they're, fair bit cheaper. They could probably score similarly. So, it's just hard to find a spot for him, I think.
Next question comes from Slacky via the website comments. He's curious to hear our thoughts on starting with Aaron Hall as a point of difference this year. He's put in brackets, high scoring potential and high injury risk. You're certainly right, Slacky. And he also wants to know our thoughts on Jack Zeeble if he's being played in the back line.
I'm interested in Zeeble. I mean, he's 100K more than he was when we got him a couple of years ago, and he went back to that defensive role and just played the best role in the history of SuperCoach, where every time North had the ball, they just went through him. You'd want to see it in action again to see if that's exactly what he's doing this time around. But, I mean, we know he can do it. He's, obviously he's getting towards the end of his career, but it's a perfect role for him because it doesn't, he can sort of direct traffic and, he's a very smart footballer, obviously, get in the right spots. I can see him scoring quite well. I mean, Hall, I think, injury risk is a tricky thing because, we all talk about it and then we always take risks because you kind of have to. if you want to get some value, we want to pick Elliot Yeo, even though we know he's got a shocking injury history, or Nat Fyfe or somebody. But I think Hall just has gone beyond. Like, it's just the injury risk is so bad that he, you couldn't even guarantee that he's going to last out the first game that you pick him in. So, I think it's just way too risky for me.
Sounds horrible, but I think the perfect time to jump on Jack Zeeble is if Aaron Hall gets injured. Because
or when,
when Aaron Hall gets injured, I probably should say, but that's because back when Jack Zeeble was that 100k cheaper and playing that SuperCoach friendly role in defense, he was taking the kickouts, he was distributing the ball, and then Aaron Hall came along and they inserted him into the back line, and then Jack Siebel's influence started to falter, and then they started to move him in different parts of the ground. So how long does Jack Siebel stay in defence for? How long does Clarko think that he fits down there? How long until Clarko moves him because something isn't quite working the way he had hoped? I think Aaron Hall is probably safer in terms of scoring, but I wouldn't start him because as you said, Al, the injury risk is almost like you can't even guarantee him to run out of full game. Really,
I think ultimately, I don't like really either option. Like it comes down to one again. It's Aaron Hall. Like, you guys talk about the injury stuff, and that's all perfectly valid. But I think there's this weird kind of, I don't want to say hypocrisy, but weird kind of like 180 where people will look at someone like Elliot Yeo and go, oh, well, but he's had a full preseason, no nigglers or anything like that. I'll start him anyway. And I think that shows that gap between the price ranges, because Aaron Hall is slightly more expensive, I believe, than Yeo. Not by too much. But, that's really... Yeah, what's he? 538. Sorry, I'm just quickly checking myself. And like that's a significant price to pay for someone with huge upside but injury risk. So I think that's like this weird line that we draw where we'll take it with a mid pricer because we know that's a roll of the dice. But if you're spending 530k on a guy as a pod as well, like 530k, you could get Mason Redman, who I would say is another point of difference player that has huge upside. Even Jordan Ridley is around just at the 500 mark. 504. Nick Dacos, like Harry Himmelberg, even Caleb Daniel, 492. I think there's other like significant pod options that don't carry the same level of risk, and especially since you're flagging it to yourself, that means that it is a sticking point for you. To speak to the question directly, if you're flagging it to go high upside but high injury risk, well, why not go for a guy like a Caleb Daniel, who was playing midfield minutes in, an intra club today? Yeah, sure, that doesn't guarantee what's going to happen in the salad during the year, but you save a bit of money, and he's a guy who's best 22, doesn't have a huge injury history, and uses the ball really well. Like, he has all these upsides without that big downside that you're flagging. Jack Zeeble, he's too expensive. He doesn't make much sense to me to pick him as a pod. There's a lot of really good pod options in the forward line as well. It's just a weird price point and doesn't interest me without knowing what North Melbourne are going to do. And I'd be more than happy to pick him up during the season if all things are going right.
This next question is the exact reason why I'm avoiding any Carlton midfielder to start the season. This comes from Coit in the website comments. What is Cripps going to average over the first 4 to 8 weeks versus his overall? With Walsh out, he can see him being a really strong starter, but isn't 100% sure on where he may finish. He'd love to know our opinions on it.
He's been in my team at some stages. He's not at the moment, but basically for that exact reason, and with Walsh out, knowing how he started last year, just trying to look up who he plays early doors. So who the Blues got? I think they've got a reasonable run to start. Richmond,
they've got Richmond, Geelong, GWS, North, Adelaide, and St Kilda as the first 6. So
and then West Coast. GWS, North, Adelaide. Pardon me, hang on. Sorry. That run from round 3, GWS, North, Adelaide, St Kilda, West Coast. You could imagine him going on a bit of a tear in those games. And last year it was weird because he was going so well early. He obviously had a bit of an injury game. Then he fell back to the pack and had like 5 games in a row where he didn't get 100. And then he finished the year in a blaze of glory, averaged 120 over the last 5 games or something. So, we know he can do it. He's an absolute beast. So, I don't think it's the worst option at all.
Sam Walsh is such a huge part of how that team works. So when he returns, I think there could be some kind of adjustment period when he gets reinserted into the lineup, because he seems to be the main man that they want at the stoppages every single time. But when he comes back, how long will that adjustment take? And it could have all sorts of ramifications for a whole set of players in their outputs just when he returns. So yeah, I'm avoiding any Carlton midfielder to start the season, but I don't hate people taking the plunge, because I can see a world where Cripps and Hewitt even start the season well and continue to start well and continue to play well, I should say, even when Sam Walsh returns.
Patrick Cripps over the first 4 to 8 weeks will average 110. And that's fine. Like, that's good. There's probably going to be like a 160 in there, and then like a 105, but then like a 110, 115, 120, like some really good scores. But you're picking a guy for 4 to 8 weeks at 610,000. Does he make enough money then when Sam Walsh comes back and Patrick Cripps goes down, or if he goes down, and then becomes like an 85 and 90 guy? And that's not because he's a bad footballer. That's just because the roles changed. Like, what do you do then? Are you going to jump off him? And then by that time, has he lost money? Like, what do you see him averaging for the season and not for 4 to 8 weeks? Because 4 to 8 weeks is great, but then you have to jump on the elevator that's going up when yours starts going down.
The upside, I guess, where you'd be picking him on the basis that you think he can average 110 even when Walsh is there, which he basically did last year. But give him 6 weeks at the start of the year when he's just carrying the team on his back, and he can average 125 in those 6 weeks. You get off to a hot start, and then by the end of the year, it averages out. So, he finishes at a 115 average or something like that. I could see that happening.
Yeah, I can see a world where that is the case, but then they're also injecting guys like Doherty into the midfield. So, how does that change how Patrick Cripps attempts it? Like, he did go on the same big run when Doherty was in the midfield at the end there. But I think how's this Carlton mix going to work without Sam Walsh? Like, they've got Adam Chera still. Is he still there? Does he exist? Like, because he was an absolute jet at Fremantle. And he went to Carlton, and then is this the time where he comes and shows, well, this is why this was a big deal that I was going from Freo to Carlton or wherever? So does that then change what happens? 610,000 on Patrick Cripps just feels like it's not for me. But if you back yourself into doing that, I think you need to see him averaging that for a long term and not looking at a short sample. Because once the points are gone, then that's fine. But if he goes down and dips at any point, then you're having to pivot, which kind of feels a bit inefficient.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think there's like 3 or 4 mids that are around that price that are really quite interesting, that you'd basically be picking them as a pod, thinking, can I sneakily get a top 8 mid that other people have kind of overlooked because they've dropped in price a little bit for some reason. And usually it's someone who's shown in the past that they could average 115, 120. But last year they were just a bit down, and you could put Cripps in that bracket and say, well, I think he can score better than his average or what he's priced at because of the Walsh factor. Darcy Parish sort of fits in the same bracket, very similar price to Cripps. He had a bit of an injury at one stage last year. Does that mean he's a little bit underpriced and being overlooked? And then, you've got Jack Steele as well, who we know has averaged over 120 before, averaged around 110 last year, so he's priced at that. But, do you think if I just pay 600K for him, I could be getting someone who goes back to his 115, 120 ways, and I've got him for that cheaper price? But, they're all sort of a bit of, there's a bit of risk attached, and you're kind of assuming that, 120 is their natural scoring, and they were just down last year for some reason. Not that, the 120 was a real high, and then last year was back to more what we can expect.
I think you
year to
can
year.
plus or minus $10,000 on Patrick Cripps and get some really good options as well. So I think it's just about which horse you want to back. Like Christian Petrarca is 618, and then you could go all the way down to 580, and you've got Josh Kelly, who once again is actually more of a pod than Patrick Cripps. Patrick Cripps is currently in 12% of teams. Christian Petrarca's in 5%, Merritt's in 4%, Darcy Parish is in 4%, Josh Kelly's in 3%. Like, these are like uber pods. So, I mean, I feel like I was overly negative in my critique, and I do apologize because I do love Patrick Cripps and I think he's very good and I think he will score well, but I want someone long term at that price, or someone who I think is going to be long term. Like, what do I see them averaging for the whole year?
Yeah, you're
Instead
picking
of
a top 8 mid at that price.
yeah,
So
I
that's
don't want
what
to have
you're
to
expecting.
worry. Yeah, I don't want to have to worry about someone coming in and reducing that or changing that.
Speaking of top 8 in their position or top 10 in their position, Chris Harry on Twitter wants to know, who are your sliders from the top primos in each line? Who's falling out for the likes of a Hayden Young, a Mason Redmond in defence, or a Tom Green in the midfield?
Ooh.
That's always the hardest question, isn't it? Because we're all tipping who's going to go up. LDU is going to average 110. Noah Anderson's going to average 110. Tom Mitchell is going to go back to his old 115. But yeah, not everybody can go up. Some people have to come back down. And I was actually looked up during the week my draft rankings from 12 months ago, and I had Jake Lloyd was my number 1 ranked defender. And then, like, by the end of the year, he was just like not even on the radar. You wouldn't even think about picking him. And like, yeah, obviously I didn't see that coming. So
Well,
that's it can be very hard to predict. But I mean, I suppose I'm expecting Jack Sinclair to maybe come back to the pack a little bit. Just that was just such a one out of the box season, and he jumped so much on his average.
yeah,
I mean, with all those defenders, it's so hard to see them. You just assume they're all going to be really good again.
I mean, yeah, from defence, I'd say Shannon Hearn probably slips out of that top that top 8 to 10. Jack Sinclair, 12 months ago, you wouldn't have said that he was going to be a top 10 defender, but here we are. He's now the most expensive one there. I reckon he's probably a good chance to slip out. It wouldn't surprise me if James Sicily, now with the captaincy responsibilities, takes a small hit and slides a little bit, because he might find that they might need him to play a bit forward to help them there, move up onto the wings a little bit to try and help the midfield group at times. I'm not sure. It's just something that could happen. I'm not saying it will happen. I'm just saying it could happen. As for the midfield, if McRae plays half forward wing, like we've been saying in the intra clubs or hearing about in the intra clubs, I don't think that he'll be a top 8 to 10 midfielder. And
I could see Callum Mills slipping, not because of anything other than, and we've spoken about it before in the mailbag, but he's a bit of a Mr. Fix-It because he's so talented. So I could see him sliding to maybe like a 10 to 15 range, even with some absolutely big scores in there. Christian Petrarca I could probably see as well sliding out of that top 10 to make way, not because of talent, but because of just he's going to have an explosive game and then a not so explosive game.
And we still don't know if Dunkley helps or hinders Neil.
Yeah, that's probably, I would say, the biggest one out of the top 5. Because Neil's either going to be like top 3 again with Dunkley.
Yeah.
Or he's going to be probably just outside the 10. Just barely. Like, it'll be a handful of points, I reckon.
That just quickly going back to the defence, you're right. When the top end guys, it's really hard to see them falling too far. But it's interesting that you've got those 5 guys for over 600k, and then there is a bit of a gap. Like Shannon Hearn is the next most expensive defender, which I don't know if anybody's picking him. He's currently in 0% of teams, so there you go. Surely he drops back a bit. Then you've got guys like Witherden and Bailey Dale. There's definitely some room to sort of shake up that end of the top 8 to 10 defenders, at least, anyway.
We said at the top that the preseason games aren't too far away. We had a question via Instagram from Footy Mad Pete. He wants to know, how do I determine if a player is a trap or the real deal in preseason games?
grab that dice, buddy. Grab that D20. Grab that D20 and just go. If it's a 15 plus when you say the name out loud, you pick them. That's good.
I think the best way to tell if a player is a trap or the real deal is watch the game. Who's missing from the team? What role are they playing? Do they pass the eye test? Do they look good playing where they're playing? Don't just look at stats and let that tell you the whole story. If you can't watch it, try and find someone who was there. Try and find a replay. I think watch these players before settling on them as a selection. Don't let a preseason performance play someone into your team.
Yeah.
Make sure that the person who comes into your team is someone you were already considering, already had a plan to fit in if they did well. Like, don't let someone have 40 disposals, kick 3 goals, lay 8 tackles, and play themselves into your team when in previous seasons they've barely averaged 15 disposals and have been subbed out on several occasions. Like, don't back someone in because of a preseason game performance.
You know what? I find making a short list to be really helpful. So you go, I've got I'll use the Melbourne one for example, because of course I would. I'm going into this game and I want to see Brodie Grundy, Max Gawn, Lockie Hunter, and, Cozzy Pickett or whatever, because he might be getting midfield minutes, just like everybody. And then, you can watch that game and go, okay, well, is that role going to be there? What's the split? Okay, I see him doing this, I see him doing that. Because if you're just going in and you're not sort of like, I've never heard of that guy and he's playing really well in this one preseason match. You've never heard of him before, but don't let him play yourself into your team. Like, know who you want to look at and then be open to that stuff as it builds towards round one. So if you're only trying to confirm the team that you kind of currently have and the people that you're actually interested in, because you never really know rookies until they're named on the sheet. Everybody's having a great preseason until they're named on the sheet in round one.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I think Damo, that comment about the eye test is really good to just watch and see. Does it look sustainable or is it just something out of the blue? And good timing for you to mention that idea of a watch list, Clarky, because I think the Jock Reynolds crew are putting together just such a watch list for publication this week. And so keep an eye out on the Herald Sun and all the News Corp mastheads for that one, which will give us a bit of a steer as to exactly what role changes or rookies and, the things we should be watching for in these games.
Yep, I believe that's Baron and I will have that ready for the KFC Herald Sun page very soon.
That's all the questions for today. Thanks for joining us, Al.
Oh, thank you, gents. It's been an absolute pleasure. Jock Reynolds, obviously one of the great institutions of KFC SuperCoach, and I think ranked pretty highly on the Phantom's most influential fantasy and SuperCoach people on Twitter during the week, which is a big badge of honour. Well deserved.
I noticed that Phantom forgot that Azza was part of the Jock Reynolds crew, but that's all right. We can.
I believe I didn't make the list, but I also believe that Lek Dog's mustache should have been higher than Lek Dog the person.
Clarky, thank you.
It's always a pleasure.
If you're listening to this and still haven't signed up for SuperCoach, you're not too late. And now is the perfect time with preseason games just around the corner. And huge news, the winner of this year's Jock Reynolds group will take home a custom championship ring courtesy of SuperCoach Champion. That's at SC Rings on Twitter. Join using the code 990360 to pick up a ring for your league. Head to supercoachchampion.com. Use hashtag JockMailbag to get your question answered in the next episode, and we'll talk next time.